we thought you might enjoy a little change of pace. And so we decided we would just relax a little bit and tell you some stories about our own experiences with the innovation styles. William has been using the innovation styles since 1988, and I've been using the styles since the year 2000. So we have lots of experiences, although I have to say that every single session, workshop, presentation is always an experience in and of itself. It's always unique. There's always something memorable about it.
And when we were coming up with, well, what story should we tell? There were hundreds of stories, but some we laughed a lot about, some we cried in a few cases.
Yes.
And so we wanted to give you kind of a representative sampling. And we've organized the storytelling according to the unfolding of the one-day workshop. So we'll start with a story about the myths.
By the way, I just wanted to say, we organized it according to the workshop just so we wouldn't get off on too many stories, give us a little bit of focus, because our exploring style tendencies really got out of hand as we were thinking about stories. So we said, no, we need some modifying visioning focus here.
Right.
Okay, so the myths, and we did talk about this a little bit, where the myths just help to demystify innovation and lay the common groundwork so that everyone feels comfortable when they come to a workshop. But there was particularly one time we were working with some engineers, and there were 4 different teams in the room. They're called strategic account teams. They're working on customer accounts, very serious, innovative work that they're doing.
A good engineering firm.
A good engineering firm. And at the break, a very tall young man came up to us, and he was just beaming, smiling from ear to ear. And he said, "I just can't thank you enough." He said, "When my boss first told me I needed to come, and it was for 3 days, he said, when my boss first put me on the list and told me I needed to attend this 3-day workshop, he said, I couldn't figure out why he wanted me to come, because I'm not the one developing the designs for the new product. I'm just doing the back end kind of work that I need to do. So I didn't understand, what innovation had to do with me. And you helped me in the first hour to understand why I'm here and why innovation is important in my work. And I will tell you, all 3 days, he participated so strongly and was very, very happy.
There was another time when we were working with a client with the quick draw exercise. And as you recall, we start the exercise with 2 dots for the eyes and have people in pairs draw a face. Well, in this workshop, 2 different pairs actually broke the rules, which was nice. They only drew 1 eye, and they ended up drawing a face in profile. And we celebrated that. First of all, I was surprised, but we also celebrated that, part of being innovative is to go outside of the even the conventional rules, even the instructor rules, and produce something new, better, and different.
The reason why we wanted to tell that story is that out of the hundreds of times that we've done the quick draw exercise, that is the only time we've ever had a profile face drawn, and it was drawn by 2 different pairs of people in that one particular workshop. So you never know what's going to happen with the quick draw.
Now, there was a time when we were working with a group that we were trying to explain the difference between visioning and experimenting.
And it was a cement company in India, actually.
And so, it was experimenting, as you would call it. You're putting together many things in new and novel combinations to produce a unique thing. And I was trying to draw an example. I said, well, for example, in the West, we have for breakfast pancakes with sweet syrup and fruit. And in India, you have what they call an idli. It's a rice pancake, if you will. And they put very spicy, what they call sambar. It's a sauce, very spicy on it. I said, now suppose we were to combine those 2 things and put blueberries and syrup as part of the idli.
And the whole room went, ugh.
And one person came up at break says, "Oh, sir, this is such a wonderful workshop, but please never, never mention blueberry idlis again."
Now, another thing that we really find on a regular basis, actually, is people really transforming their views about those that they have worked with and seeing them in a whole new light. And there was a particular lady, she was a senior leader for a leadership institute of an international company. And she found out about the styles and wanted to include them in her curriculum, her leadership curriculum. And so she took the styles assessment, and she had her boss take the styles assessment as well. And what she discovered is what she already knew, that they thought very differently, but she didn't exactly know why. She had, of course, gained insights from different assessments, leadership assessments they had taken. But nothing that they had done previously had really turned the corner on their relationship.
Right.
And the styles did that. She is one of the strongest visioning style, has the strongest visioning style preference of almost anybody we've ever worked directly with over time. And as it turned out, her boss had a very strong experimenting style preference. As she began to learn more about the styles and began to discuss this with her boss, over time, they just had such a transformation in their relationship, and they truly learned how to work together.
And it really showed how compassion for the other person's way of thinking and trust in the other person's way of thinking really facilitated that conversation so that they could really respect each other's styles and respect the person behind the style.
Well, I want to underline understanding first. Understanding yourself, understanding the other person, and then building that trust. They did have a lot of respect for each other, but this just took them to that level that they were both really wanting to go to and reduced the stress and the conflicts that they were having. There's another story about the transformation like this that I also want to tell. There is a man that we've worked with for a long time who he's an entrepreneur at heart and has started many different companies. And he had an assistant that was just excellent. He had worked with him for years, and he just did excellent work. And they were getting ready, he and his company were getting ready to start a new venture. And so he thought, of course, that he would take his assistant with him, which he had done many times. So he called in his assistant, and he began to talk to his assistant about this long-term vision of what he had. He was more of a visioning, exploring style. And he started talking to his assistant about this long-term vision, and he gave his assistant some assignments for planning, helping to plan how they might go about accomplishing this long-term vision. And with his next meeting, the assistant came back in and he didn't have any input, which was unusual of sorts. So he once again went through his long-term vision. Poor assistant. Once again went through his long-term vision, gave him the assignment to do some planning. He came in the second time and he really didn't have any input. And so our client was really frustrated. And he started thinking about it. He's quite self-reflective. And so he started thinking about it. And one morning he woke up and he realized, first of all, he knew the styles. He knew his assistant had a totally opposite style of thinking. But he forgot that his assistant, who had more of a preference for modifying and experimenting, needed some data, some facts, needed an assignment that would really bring out his best thinking in a more modifying and experimenting way. He was so excited about this insight, he went right to work, called in the assistant. He gets excited like that. Called in his assistant and apologized to the assistant and told him his insight. They started talking about details about this particular new venture, gave him an assignment that was much more detail-oriented, much more geared toward what he could do. And as you can imagine, the assistant really blossomed. The assistant went with him to the new venture. And I will tell you that client, even today, he laments that he really almost was going to leave the assistant behind at the current corporation and not take him with him. He laments that he almost made a really major decision for him and for his assistant that it was just because he didn't understand the style of thinking. It was his deficiency
Right.
that was keeping the assistant from really blossoming or
Not the employee's deficiency.
Exactly.
There's, speaking of those kinds of insights, there are times, one time I remember exactly where a person received their feedback in a workshop, and this was a person who was quite strong, I think in 2 different styles. And the person could hardly hold still as he read his feedback. I mean, he was wiggling couldn't wait to raise his hand to get our attention and talk.
I was watching him and wondering, what's he going to say?
He was so excited. He says, "This is exactly the way I work. This so describes me. It's amazing. How did you do that?" And of course, the styles just really fit for him, as he had answered based on how he was most successful in his current work.
Handling challenges in his current work.
And so, it just fit for him. And there is that sense of excitement that people have when they feel they understand themselves better, and then they know that other people can understand them better as well. And that they can then turn that to understand other people. That sense of understanding and that clarity of, okay, this makes sense out of where things work and where things don't work.
Now tell the story where you had the man who was not happy with his profile and had fire coming out of his ears.
This was a time when the person was taking the assessment in a paper version that we used long ago.
Many years ago, before the IT system.
Decades ago. And I was having them fill out the questionnaire before going to lunch, and then after lunch we'd score it and we'd talk about it. So everybody else had gone to lunch, but this one person who was sitting in the back of the room, and as he was taking the questionnaire, he was just visibly upset, almost angry, like almost fire coming out of his ears. I said, "What's wrong?" He says, "This is not a fair test." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You've asked us to answer it based on how we work best around here." I said, "Yeah, how do you work best around here? That's the context." He says, "Well, how I work best around here is not how I do my best work." Oh, okay. So I had him finish the questionnaire based on the original context of how he's most successful with challenges in his current work. And then said, "Now, answer it a second time based on your ideal work environment." And he answered it the second time, and we looked at the 2 scores later, and his exploring and modifying scores didn't change at all. But in his current work, he was very strongly experimenting, and he was quite successful at that. But in his ideal environment, he was very, very strongly visioning. And that was the source of the frustration that came out for him, was that he was not being called upon to give his very, very best in terms of innovative thinking. And that he felt frustrated. There was a mismatch between what he could offer and what his job was requiring him to do.
When you get ready to put people up around the room according to their innovation style preferences, there's always a lot of fun there, because especially if it's an intact team or the same company and they know each other, they'll recognize people of the opposite style. I remember one time we put people up around the room, and there was one guy up in the visioning modifying corner, and there was about 10 people over in the exploring experimenting corner. Do you remember that? It was several years ago. And the one guy up in the visioning modifying corner, and then there were a lot of exploring as well, a lot of experimenting. The guy up in the visioning modifying corner, I'll never forget, he looked at William and he said, "I'm the only one here and there's all of them over there. What does that mean?" And I love it. William looked at him and he said, "Do you ever feel lonely?" And everybody in the whole room cracked up.
Including him.
Including him, because it was so true. See, modifying visioning, that kind of person, that style preference is very focused. I call it double focused. Exploring, experimenting, they're double open, so they're doubly opposite. And you can really count on that they are going to be quite different in their way of thinking. But there was one time I was working with a leadership team, and it was cross-functional in this particular workshop. And when I put them up around the room, there was a lot of laughter. So I stopped and said, "Okay, Why are you laughing? And they were so surprised because they had 4 people from finance in the workshop, and there was one person from finance in each style. And they were not surprised. In fact, they were laughing because they immediately understood why they had the different debates that they had and the different conflicts that they had. So interesting. There were all these functions represented, but the finance function took over the entire conversation while they were standing up because they had so many insights. And that may happen sometimes, that people are just bursting with their own insights. I'm not sure how. I think I quickly went through how each style supports and hinders, because I needed to give time to just these bursting insights that were coming out.
Tell the story about working with that pseudo-organization chart with the team while we're talking here about the debriefing of the styles profiles in a group.
I had a small IT team one time that I was spending the day with, and I had so much fun with them. They happened to send me their organizational chart, and so I saw who reported to who. And so you might recall in the one-day workshop, there's an organizational chart where you can put in, if you want to use it with an intact team like that, you can, or you can use it generically. But with this team, I actually put in what their different styles were without their names. And by the way, I want to mention this was an extremely quiet group of guys. At lunchtime, we had almost no conversation, which is, highly unusual. But anyway, when I got to this particular team chart, and I said, what do you see the dynamics might be of this team? And of course, I prodded them along the way. What about this? What about that? They really opened up a lot, and they really started talking about, this person that, and this person that, and I feel sorry for that guy over there. And they started laughing, and it really opened them up. And I was smiling inside because I knew it was their team, but they didn't know that. So I really let them explore, what the insights were that they saw. And then I said, guess what? This is your team.
And you showed the names?
I showed the names. Then I went to the next slide, which had their style and their names on it. And it was just the best. It was so cool, so insightful for them.
So that's the end of this first video of stories. And we'll move on to the second video of these and give you another half a dozen or more stories as well.